correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome to Me and Steve Talk RPG, the podcast where me and my friend Steve try and help you get the most out of your role-playing game experience.
Welcome back to Me and Steve Talk RPGs. I'm here with my friend Steve.
Hello, Steve.
Hello, Steve. And we're going to talk some RPGs, but before we get into that, we are going to talk about the ever fantastic Story Told podcast.
Yes, The Story Told is another podcast on the wonderful D20 Radio Network, of which, of course, we are a part. It's hosted by Logan, and I know Griffin has been the co-host for a while, but I believe that's changing or has changed. I'm not sure on the timeline, so don't take that for gospel, but I do know there is another co-host coming in, kind of a variety show. They do topics about, there'll be game reviews, maybe, play concepts, in some ways a little bit like us, although obviously different opinions because different people. They also do some actual play content. I believe they're currently running a Fabula Ultima campaign. And actually, on the actual play front, Logan will be joining our Exalted actual play. I believe not the next episode, but the episode after that is when his character shows up.
Yeah, I was just about to say, Logan is playing Exalted with us, and that is awesome. And Logan is good people. And as always, the Story Told podcast is great content, and yeah, just really fantastic.
Yeah, they've been around for quite a long time, so they're everywhere you find podcasts and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as has been sort of the standard around here, you have come up with tonight's topic, and you had sort of pitched it to me about doing a debate, but we sort of are on the same side on this.
They're at least of similar opinion, which is, gee, shock, right? But anyway, now my kind of contention is that I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I think that the idea of balance in an RPG context is extremely overstated, I guess is the best way to put it. And I don't say that to mean that you don't want the game to be equitable, but worrying about to me, that's harkens back to the idea that it is a game of opposition. Like it's the players versus the game master, or the players versus the other players. And the idea that you have to have strict mechanical balance, to me, like, I don't know. And look, let's all be honest, D&D, that is a huge factor in that game. But at the same point, Dungeons and Dragons is incredibly combat centric in terms of the actual design of the system. And if there is a segment of gameplay that I think balance is more important to, it might be combat. But we can get into some of that as we go on down the road here.
Yeah, balance is one of those things where I look at it as sort of a two-edged sword. I think on one side, you have the idea that, yeah, you want to have balance because balance keeps combat fair across the board, and you don't have players overpowered or the GM's not overpowered. And while that's true for more combat and tactically minded games, on the other side of that coin is, forget balance. Let's throw it out the window. Let's go, crazy, balls to the wall, do what we can, and let's just see where this takes us. And that's also valid, but it depends on the type of game you're playing. So, for example, I don't expect Call of Cthulhu game to be balanced. I don't expect Delta Green to be balanced, especially not player side. I expect that to be if that's a scale, if it's a scale, where you have weights on each side,
Yeah.
I would expect that to be more weighted towards the GM side of things as far as their ability to mess with players, their ability to um, put the pressure on. Whereas something like Dungeons and Dragons, if you try to do that, the players are going to sit there and be like, "This isn't fair," and that's true in that game because it's not fair in Dungeons and Dragons for the GM to be like, "Oh, well, we have this thing that you see and you go crazy."
Well, the other thing in Dungeons and Dragons is built around the premise that every combat is a fight basically to the death or to surrender, not to get away. And I'm going to give you two reasons that I can to support that. One, there are no good chase mechanics in Dungeons and Dragons. Or at
Right.
least there weren't. I don't know. I haven't read it in a while, so they may have put something in. But there, and to my knowledge, have never been actual good chase mechanics. Two, the attack of opportunity rule.
Attack of opportunity.
Triggered by moving from a threatened square. I
Yeah.
understand the concept in terms of, why that could trigger it, but it basically incentivizes fighting to the death or until one party says I surrender and the other party elects not to kill them.
It's kind of like I didn't really have any siblings, but I definitely had friends that it was like this. You ever play fight with somebody until they're just like, "All right, all right, all right, I give up. I give up." That's kind of
Yeah,
what combat in D&D is like. Either you're going to kill them or they're going to give up, and there is no in between.
right?
And I think that's how that game's built. That game's built around the idea of fight to the death or don't fight at all.
Well, and in that context, balance is an important factor because running away really isn't a valid option
Yes and no. I think
mechanically.
I think a, mechanically possibly. I think a lot of times, especially with like attack of opportunity type stuff, there are things like disengage and there are ways to get out of attack of opportunities, especially in that type of situation. But I think it's one of those things where you have to keep in mind there's a lot of culture around that game and people not being encouraged to run away, and that's maybe part of the problem. Part of the problem is that from day one that game has been built with the idea of, oh well, yeah, don't take the coward's way out.
Right,
But
right.
the fact of it is that it's always an option. It's always an option to just run. Not saying things won't catch up to you later. And I know
Right.
there's no I mean, and we've talked about this before, not saying that there's any good mechanics for actually chasing, but you could figure something out on how to chase. You know
Right.
what I
Oh,
mean?
it's absolutely something that you can do at the table, but I'm not aware of there being anything in the book that advises you on how to do that, other than I think there's something with, I don't know if it's dex checks or you know, endurance checks or whatever, which I forget which stat that would be now, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand.
Like it just feels like and so at that point, yes, balance is a thing because but see the other thing to get to what you were just saying, I'm just kind of circling back very quickly here. Um,
Go ahead.
you and I come at this from the perspective of people who have been playing games for years.
That is also true.
If you're a new gamer, you don't have that. This kind of goes into the discussion I had with the last chat episode with Brett of, you know, rule zero and how do you do things and when do you kind of just let the rules slide because it makes more sense for the story or the fun or whatever. If you're new to a game, boy, that not having that kind of indicates that you aren't supposed to do that.
Yeah, I can get that. I think that's where yeah, definitely. I no, I definitely see where you're coming from on that one because I know for myself, like when I was a younger gamer, retreat was never an option. Retreat was never an option. It was always we're gonna stand here and fight until something happens. And I mean, if that's how you want to play, go for it. That's fantastic. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, I'm not telling you, I'm not telling anyone to do anything any particular way. But the fact of it is that you do have that option. You do always have well, not always, but for the most part, you do have the option of I need to get out of this situation. There's a bit in Critical Role Campaign 2. Uh I couldn't tell you the episode, couldn't tell you when it happens. Taliesin Jaffe is playing so it's after he switched over to his
the
second character,
yeah I
the
can't
Furball,
even think of the character's name, but I know what you're
Caduceus
talking about.
Clay.
Yeah.
They're in a combat. Things are going badly. Somebody who had been knocked out of the combat is coming back. However, the board is changing, and Taliesin Jaffe is able to say a few words as he's like running out the door, and he looks at the player that's coming back into combat and goes, "We're running. It's bad." And that sums up to a T anytime that at least I've ended up running in Dungeons and Dragons, it's bad. We gotta go. Like, we can't, this is not happening. Like, whether it be bad rolls, whether it be, just absolute demolishment of like everything.
Hmm.
But yeah, we're running, it's bad it's the perfect example of, yeah, that's in Dungeons and Dragons, that's usually the case, is we're running, it's bad.
Yeah. But I mean, I think, like, how do I want to say this? Okay, many times we are playing heroically toned games a lot of the time. Like you and I both like things that aren't necessarily, you mentioned, Call of Cthulhu, Delta Green, etc. But in a heroically toned game, I wonder if perhaps we overemphasize the constant overcoming of the obstacle as opposed to the eventual overcoming of the obstacle. And there's a line there as to the tone of your story, but you get where I'm going at?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things where it's the discussion of, is this a hurdle or is this a mountain we need to climb? Is
Right.
is is the current situation just a hurdle we can just sort of jump over and move on to the next thing? Or are we facing something that is just going to be an absolute slog and we need to reevaluate and come back later?
Mhm.
And doing that, I don't know. Sometimes that threat assessment doesn't, like, it just can't happen. Sometimes you're too far in and you're just like, well, we're just gonna have to figure something out now. And that's when you do have the option in a lot of cases to run, to try and escape, even if you're using every bit of your abilities to do so. But yeah, that threat assessment type thing, that is one of those, you got to make that with the party and you got to have a plan.
Yeah.
Um and again, we talked about running away, but like it's one of those things where it's, at the core we're talking about balance. Well, again, I don't think balance is one of those things. So we've talked about it as far as like Dungeons and Dragons, which is more of a combat, uh I would say tactically focused game,
Right.
especially when it comes to their combat.
Well,
Something like,
go ahead.
something like, let's say, Havoc Brigade, which
Mhm.
we've talked a lot about. That's a game that's not balanced in the slightest. And it's not, well, it is and it isn't. It's meant to give the illusion that it's not balanced. Um, Although it is, but it's just balanced heavily towards player side.
Well, but I think that so Havoc Brigade. So in I think in a way we're talking about two different kinds of balance because I'm not necessarily talking balance necessarily player GM, and in some ways I'm thinking statistical balance was what was in my head, which in some cases yes does apply to player versus GM. I think a balance that is important in games is one that's not so much statistical, but in more of a focus balance, which is exactly what Havoc Brigade is designed to do. Does that make sense? In terms
Yeah,
of
it does.
every character gets their moment of whatever.
Well, that's one of those, every character gets their moment in the sun.
Right.
And that's fantastic. I mean, that's
Right.
just great.
Absolutely.
Um, and I completely agree with that balance. And doing it that way is, in my opinion, a really fantastic way of doing it. Um, I don't know. My brain just shut off for
Well,
2 seconds.
I think though, okay, if a game heavily if a game heavily emphasizes combat, a mechanical balance is much more required so that the narrative or spotlight balance happens because it's action, right? Like, and I'm just going to say this because I know they did the, what was it, Twins or whatever together. But if you have an action movie and you have Danny DeVito starring opposite Arnold Schwarzenegger, which one of them is going to be better at the action scenes?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's of course going to be Danny DeVito.
You know, but if it's more of a action comedy, well, no knock against Arnold, but I'm thinking DeVito is probably the better actual actor comedian as opposed to Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is a better action star. And so by
Right.
having it be, not that Arnold can't play comedic roles or whoever, you
No,
know,
no,
uh,
that's not what you're saying. It's a focus type thing.
right.
Um,
If you have Brad Richardson and Dwayne Johnson playing together in a movie, okay, The Rock is actually a pretty talented physical comedian,
right,
but you're going to give that work mostly to Richardson because that's what he's good at. And there are things that The Rock can do that he just can't because, you know, obviously.
right. Of course, of course. And that's again, that's different talents for different people. And in this case, that's different talents for different players. You know, it's the idea of uh while everybody can do something, there are people that are better at doing that thing than others. For
Right.
example, a perfect example of this, let's say Cyberpunk, right? Any Cyberpunk character, especially in Red, can attempt to do like net running type things, can attempt to do combat type things, can attempt to do car things. How well they do with those things is completely up to how that character is specialized or how good their roles ended up being.
Yes.
And it, and somebody may, just because the solo has done some net running in the past doesn't necessarily mean that the solo is the net runner, right? Like if
Right.
you come across a dedicated net runner, that person is going to be able to do net running things way better than that solo who's just bumbling their way through it trying to figure it out.
Right.
It's the same between, like, while I understand basic like house wiring, like I've done some like changing of light sockets and switches and lights and things like that. I'm not going to wire a house. I have no idea how to wire a house,
Yeah.
but an
No.
electrician knows exactly what goes into that. you know?
Right. Well, I mean, just, I mean, I'm not going to spend the time to go into whatever they might be, but there are things that I might be very good at and you not so much, and vice versa. And that's
Exactly.
the the reality of existence, right? Like, and there are
Yeah,
things,
everybody has their talents. Everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. And we see that in gaming. And again, that's, life's not balanced. Real life isn't balanced. There are people that, and for whatever reason, there are people that are dealt a hand that's maybe a card or two short. That's life. I,
but I think that's in a sense, I wonder, if the idea that we want is there a culture of over, what the heck is the word I'm wanting right now? Over, to not incentivize, like overemphasizing mechanical balance in place of the table consciously finding the balance that works for them. We've played at tables with people that were very happy to just do the thing when it was their turn and kind of be along with the ride. Probably everyone has, where you have other people that want to be more active. And, like I know for me, I like to be active, but I also like to be interactive with the other people at the table.
Right.
So
Yeah,
it
go ahead.
requires some learning of, oh, hey, this person at this table, if I, throws them the conversational football, gets all flustered and juggles it, where these two people, we can juggle it back and forth. And this other person who was all juggling it is perfectly happy to just watch us play.
Well, yeah. You know, sometimes that's the way it is. Sometimes somebody needs to be the one that's like, yeah, I'm not the combat guy. I'm just here or I'm not the X person, so that's on you. Like,
Right. And I think, it's I don't want to say it's just on the GM though to make sure that everybody gets involved. If you've got that player at your table and you're a player and person doesn't want to be involved, but their character doesn't want to be involved all the time, but their character is good at something, I think, you kind
I
of
think
owe
you
it.
need to give them the nudge though and be like,
Yes,
"Hey," because I wonder sometimes of that. And what I'll say about that is sometimes, and this is also true for us. I may look at something and you may look at something and see two very different things.
very true.
Like I may look at a character sheet and be like, "Oh, well this build does this." And you may look at it and go, "Well, but it also does this." And
Yeah.
it's one of
Yeah.
those, it's not necessarily that there's a right or a wrong way. It's maybe more so that there is this idea that not everybody's going to see everything the same way. Not everybody's going to notice all of the puzzle pieces. Fantastic example of this. We were playing Triangle Agency a while back, and it was me and a handful of me and like two or three other players. And I'm terrible at puzzles, just absolutely awful at them. I'm not a puzzle person. I'm not a puzzle person in real life. I hate like not hate puzzles. I love puzzles. I think they're great for uh, people that are good at solving them. But if it's not some kind of like, I don't know, mechanical physical thing, I have a hard time with it.
Mhm.
And there was a word puzzle that had popped up, and I looked at it, had no clue. I had the other players look at it, they had no clue. And then one of our other players from across the room was like, "Oh, what's this? You didn't figure that out yet?" And I was like, "Well, no." It had occurred to them in milliseconds what the answer to the puzzle was, and it took me like I until they pointed it out, I was like, I didn't see any of that.
Mhm. No,
And
that's
and
perfectly,
it's
yeah.
and it's perfectly valid. That's a player who is using their real life abilities of puzzle solving to solve the puzzle as their character, which is fine. Some of that has to be accepted. But it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, me as a person, I'd have never figured that out. We would have been stuck on that for days.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, go ahead.
Well, so I think that's, just because you said puzzles, I think puzzles are a tricky thing because they very much are much more for the players than the characters in a lot of ways.
In a lot of ways, I think sometimes, puzzles are often just like themed challenges.
Yeah, no,
And
that's fair.
I say that in the sense that they're a themed challenge in that they're themed towards what the story is trying to tell you, and that it's the same way that it's like you know, I don't know how to put it.
No, I get where you're
Themed
going.
towards Yeah. It's thematically it fits within the game, but it's also just a challenge for and and doing puzzles. So there's we've talked a lot about puzzles. I'd love to have someone who we need to find somebody who's really good at designing puzzles and talk to them.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Have to ask around, I think.
Yeah, that might be taking a little bit if you have a suggestion on somebody we should reach out to that's like a puzzle master, please drop a comment in the Discord. But Yeah, it's one of those things where puzzles, I feel, like you said, are an in-game excuse for out-of-game discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, that's one of those balance things. I don't know. I don't know where my train of thought was going with this.
No, I'm not sure exactly where you were going, but I was following along. I mean, I think it's okay, but see, that's where the balance, if you want to call it that, do you just because statistically the character should be able to figure out the puzzle doesn't mean the players can, or vice versa.
Right. And that's one of those. I think if that's the case, you put the puzzle up to the play. In my opinion, what I would do in a situation like that. So let's say a puzzle's presented to the table. The characters have all the knowledge. You know they have all the information, um, and you also know that they should be able, like the characters themselves should be able to solve this puzzle, but the players aren't putting the pieces together. At a certain point, after you've let them struggle for a little while, because that's the name of the game with puzzles in a lot of cases, is just let them struggle for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
After you've let them struggle for a little while, just be like, okay, you're not getting this. Do you want to make some kind of check to see see if your character knows what the answer to this puzzle is?
Yeah.
And if they're like, yeah, and you go, okay, make me an X check, and they do it and they succeed, and you give them the answer or pieces to the answer to the puzzle, that's a different beast entirely. And I've done that like once or twice with like puzzles that I've worked with from pre-written modules. I'm not a huge pre-written person, but I have on occasion had to break out stuff just because, you know, once in a while you don't have time to prep for a session, so you're like, well, I need to throw something on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
No,
Go ahead.
I don't know. Yeah, that's the thing. And but see, I think too, right? Like that gets into the thing, uh, balance. But see, I'm just going to circle back to something else that's been kicking around my head. Part of the
Okay.
problem with a heavily enforced mechanical balance is it also very heavily emphasizes system mastery.
Hmm.
Go back to, and you ran that one goofy one shot we played in fifth edition way back when, where I played the dwarven ranger with the bear,
Oh yeah,
and
a bajillion years
just a
ago.
basic beastmaster ranger. It was predicated off the idea that my ranger rode the bear and you couldn't tell where his beard ended and the bear started.
Right.
That was the thing in my head with this character.
Hmm.
And at the time, I remember there being a lot of discussion about how Rangers, and specifically Beastmaster Rangers, were horrendously underpowered. And
Correct.
yet, as I recall the way that adventure played out, I was the frickin' cannon. Like I was,
Yes, I
and
feel like shenanigans had happened though, and it wasn't. It was something to do with dice.
that's very possible. I don't remember, but the thing I was kind of driving at is just because of how my brain analyzes things, I can see the pattern that the design wants you to take to get maybe not the absolute most out of it, but a lot out of what you're able to do. And therefore, I was able to do things in a mechanically more efficient order, even though I hadn't necessarily tried to build a min max character. My knowledge and my ability to analyze the system allowed me to be more effective in combat than at least conventional wisdom would indicate that I should have been relative to the other characters.
Yes.
So in this case, we're talking about a game that is designed heavily around mechanical balance, and yet in this example, the difference in player ability tossed that basically out the window. And I think that's the fallacy of it, in that you can design all you want, but players going to do player things. And so I think maybe from a design standpoint, and this would be fun to maybe put to some people who are heavier into system design, is, at what point do you try to not make it way out of whack, but that's kind of where you stop.
Yeah, it's one of those how far can we push this before it's too far? How far can we push the boulder off the edge of this cliff before it actually starts to roll down the hill?
Mm-hmm.
And finding that is something that it just takes, if not pure talent, it takes time and understanding. And it's something that you're just going to have to learn over time, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing I could tell you as far as balance there's nothing I could tell you as far as educating you on balance that would help in any meaningful way aside from, well, have fun.
Right. Yeah. I think that's the thing is like I guess maybe my point in all of this is that you shouldn't just leave it up to the mechanics of the system to provide a happy balance at your table.
No. No, I completely agree with that. Um,
You
yeah,
know,
you
I mean,
shouldn't. Yeah.
but but I think some of that comes to, if you're the GM, making sure, because you're going to have characters that are more combat oriented, more characters that are more larceny oriented, characters that are more talky investigation oriented, whatever. And you have I think your aim should be to, structure your game so that there is that you achieve the happily desired spotlight balance between the characters, even if that's not mechanical.
Right. Yeah, yeah. And finding that right spotlight for the players and the characters and the story is definitely one of those things that you just got to play around with, and you know, it can be challenging. Uh it's one of those things in this hobby that is challenging.
Oh, I think it's absolutely the art of it all.
Exactly. It is one of those things where that is the name of the game, unfortunately, in a lot of ways. And that's why, and I'm sorry, and I don't want to say I'm sorry. Not everything's for everyone, and I can completely understand if that's a complete hurdle that someone couldn't get over as far as GMing.
Hmm. Oh,
Like
it's
if that's something that's hanging you up, you can't hit that right balance, maybe you're running the wrong kind of game, or maybe it's just not for you.
well, I mean, I think that's it, right? It's not the right game, or it's not the right game for your table, and that's a fully valid thing. I mean, or it could be that maybe the format that you're running in doesn't work for you as a GM. I realized that some with the group that we had going that played on weeknights, that my GM style, my storytelling style is very much more slow burn, and we were playing short sessions, and that just didn't go together.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's yeah. And that can be the case. And sometimes it takes a change. And
Hmm.
sometimes it takes a major change. And sometimes that's one of those, we've talked about we talked a little bit about it a little bit ago. Balance is one of those things that's fluid also.
Yes.
Whereas
Yes.
you might put your thumb on the scale and weigh it down towards one side. Somebody else can put their thumb on that same scale and weigh it down towards their side. And so it's constantly a back and forth of, in certain games specifically, it's this back and forth balance of, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Let's look at Genesis or Star Wars, right?
Hmm.
Uh, One of the things I absolutely adore in Genesis and Star Wars is the light side and dark side points, or the
Story points or destiny, whatever they're
story
called.
points. Yes. So that's a balance thing. I'm going to flip this coin your way, and I want to do a thing, and then you're going to flip it back my way because you want to do a thing, and then I'm going to flip it back your way because you want to do it. You know what I mean?
Right, right, absolutely.
And it's something that it's like one of the few things that I genuinely kind of miss when I'm not playing Genesis is having the ability of being like, but that actually happened.
Yeah, yeah, that is an exceptional mechanic out of that game engine. I think, like but okay, the story points are very much a sort of narrative spotlight balance that do play into some of the mechanics, but it's not, you can use a story point to have a chance of hitting the Sith Lord, as opposed
Well, yeah.
to not that, and again, the mechanics of that system are such that any roll can potentially succeed, regardless of how lopsided the pool seems. But that's a whole nother
Yeah,
story.
but it gives you, by using a story point, it gives you a little bit more
Right,
swing in that direction.
right, or potential in whatever direction.
Right. That's one of those things where, yeah, the ability to put your thumb on that scale, I think just really, I know I said that already, but it really just, it makes me so warm and fuzzy on the inside. I love that mechanic so much.
Well, I think though, I think it feels like both of us in a lot of ways are saying though that we're more concerned about the flow and the feel and the narrative than we are about the mechanical crunchy bits.
Yes, but also, and I'm sorry, if you come to us and you expect us to be all about those mechanical crunchy bits, I don't think you've listened to enough of us. Because we're not, neither of us are concerned. Let me put it this way. When a player rolls dice in my Dungeons and Dragons game, I do not care what that number is. Meaning that it it is either success, critical, or failure. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I could care less that the target number was a 15 and you hit a 16. Now that's gonna matter to somebody. But to me personally, I don't care. Did you succeed or not? You did succeed? Fantastic. Did you crit? No. Okay. But somebody cares. Somebody cares that it's a 16, 17, 18. Like uh, my buddy Sean, I I play with him on the regular. He is somebody who's obsessed with numbers. He's always, uh, min-maxing, we used to call it back in the day, right? I don't
Right.
know if we still call it that.
That's the term a term I use anyway.
Yeah, it's a term I use. But he was always, he's always trying to like get the most out of, oh, if I do this, I do this, I do that, I get this, I get that. He's always trying to do that kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
I could care less. I really don't. Am I going to succeed or not? Am I good at this thing? No. Oh, great. Let's roll dice and see what happens. Am I absolutely awesome at this thing? Oh, good. I can do this. Like I'm good at this. Oh, you mean I rolled one? Oh, oops.
Well, but I mean, I think it's yeah, I boy, that actually brings up a whole nother potential thought for a topic. But
Okay,
anyway,
write it down, save it for later. Because we're gonna need. What? Listen, if you want to get featured on the podcast, let me tell you what. I would like to make a channel. Let me do
just
something
go an
stupid real
episode
quick.
discussion even.
Yeah, we could even have you put an episode discussion. If you want to be featured on the podcast, with a shout out to your name, go ahead and post up in episode discussion a
Show discussion
topic
actually is
for
what
the
it's called.
show. What was it?
Show discussion. I
Show
think
discussion in the
yeah, I'm looking at
Discord
our list now. Or questions and answers.
or questions and answers. Put it
I don't
somewhere
put it on
in
the
our
Discord. We'll see it.
Discord. Yeah, put it somewhere on the Discord. And we'll gladly feature your topic because it's we Steve comes up with a lot of these topics. It's hard for me and a lot of times. Like I have thoughts, but I don't have the framework to get things started.
Well, and sometimes it's you'll have something that you think is a topic and it dies, or it because of our combined attention span or lack thereof devolves into something completely different.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Speaking of something completely different, any final thoughts on balance?
I mean, I don't know. I think I'm just going to say that from my perspective, I think this in some cases crazed emphasis on mechanical balance is highly overrated.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the obsession with mechanical balance is highly overrated, but I think it is something that a player base enjoys, and so you can't ignore it completely. Just one of those things where you just sort of have to work with what you got.
And I do think it also is subject to what game are you playing, not necessarily from the, well, if you're playing X game, it's more important, but more of what type of game are you playing?
Right. What yes, what type of game are you playing is very critical to the balance of how you run things.
Mm-hmm.
But with all that being said, let's go ahead and move into game of the week.
Woohoo! Game of the week!
Game of the week. Game of the week.
So I have a game. It's a solo or a group game, but probably more so a solo game.
Okay.
I like the concept. It's really interesting. So it's a game called Heavy Weighs the Crown.
Okay.
It just came out December 2nd. I am throwing it up in the channel here momentarily. Doop doop.
Ooh.
So this is it's a game about magical crowns and the monarchs that wear them and the realms they rule together. It is a journaling and map making type game, which I haven't done much of, but I would love to break into some of those.
Mhm.
You can play with a solo or you can play with a group. I think playing with a group could be really interesting. But the thing that makes this game especially interesting is the perspective. So you play as the crown,
Okay.
and you are telling the story of the various monarchs and the various people that have handled you and worn you over the years, and how the kingdom has changed, how the landscape is, different wars, different things that have happened under different reigns. And as a history nerd, I think this sounds like a lot of fun.
It does sound very interesting, and I like the fact that it's also kind of done from a different perspective.
Yeah, I thought that was the really coolest part, was that it's like if a inanimate object. Okay, so there was uh you're a well-read person. Um Gary Paulson, who wrote the Hatchet series.
Okay.
Are you familiar with Hatchet?
No.
It was a okay. The Hatchet novel is it's like a survival novel about this kid, this 13-year-old kid that gets strapped in the Canadian wilderness. It's a really fantastic short little read. I don't remember how many pages it is. I highly recommend it. If you haven't read it, it's really fantastic. But anyways, he wrote another short, I guess you'd probably call it novella,
Mhm.
called The Rifle, which is this story of this handmade historical rifle. And, you know, it goes through the American Revolution and then it goes through the Civil War. And it's a very interesting story that ends in a very interesting ending. I don't give anything away,
Mhm.
but this reminds me of that book specifically, The Rifle. Uh, just in the sense that it's told through. Oh, sorry. Just in the sense that it's told through an inanimate object.
Mhm.
Um, and I love that concept. I love the idea of, if you know, we've heard it. If these walls could speak. Well, yeah. If
Mhm.
these walls could speak, I'd hate to hear their stories.
Well, there's that. Yeah, no, but yeah, that alternate perspective I think makes it very interesting.
Yeah, I'm, $8. It's on drive through. Links will be in the doobly doo. Um, yeah, definitely check it out. And the artwork, the cover art looks really cool, among other things.
Yeah, it's kind of different.
And for what it's worth, for what it's worth, drive through lists it as human created without AI.
Mhm.
So if that's a plus to you, then there's something to be aware of. But yeah, that's Heavy Weighs the Crown.
Cool, very cool. All right, well, I'm going to go in a historic direction also. This is something that actually came up in a like the sidebar of something that I was looking at, and
Oh,
it's
I
a
just
kind of a
looked at this.
quick start now. Well, now it does say that there is some AI generated content in it. I'll say that up front. based on what I looked at, I believe that to be some of the artwork because it is very kind of graphic layout heavy. It also kind of has that look of whatever, but it's more tonal artwork as opposed to actual art pieces. But be that as it will, the title is Pay What You Want. This is called the Iron Grit Demo, and it is a World War One trench warfare game, kind of playing along the lines, but of between reality and potentially the supernatural. And based on the one review or discussion that I saw of it, it appears to be quite historically accurate or reasonably, let's put it that way. It has grit and vitality mechanics. Like I said, this is basically like a quick starter, a demo thing. So, like I said, it's pay what you want, but it looks like an interesting,
Yeah. Well,
era.
and anything set during World War One is fascinating. And maybe it's true for you too. I know for me, when I was in school, we learned a little bit about World War One, but we focused mainly on World War Two
Much more so,
and
yes.
like forward. What was that?
hmm Yeah, much more so World War II than World War One. World War One just sort of happened, and
Yeah. Yeah, that's how I was taught a lot of World War One. So now when I learn facts about it, I'm like, wow, that's wild. That's
Mhm.
crazy. And I think that's really interesting. We don't have enough uh I just don't feel like we have enough content about World War One. And
Mhm.
so having a game that is, a historical game and also being able to tell a little bit of that, that's pretty cool. That is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, no, like I said, if you look at the demo, you think I'm right that a lot of like the kind of background art looks to be AI generated. Now, clearly their preview video is pretty heavy on AI content.
Yeah, I would say a lot of this, unfortunately, a lot of this art is AI generated, which I just I can't get behind. But the game seems cool. Hopefully, you know, hopefully they kind of, I don't know. Hopefully,
Well, it's
once
the
the full
only
game
title
comes
they
out,
have on drive-through as the publisher,
right.
Reed Atlas Games. So, I mean,
Right,
and
right. And the author is Will Reed. So if I had to guess, it's probably,
the
they're
only title listed
self-publishing.
under their name as well.
Yeah. I'm just saying hopefully by the time this is ready for full release, we have proper art made by proper artists. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, that's
Um
not it. I have, mixed so what no one got to hear after the episode that Brett and I recorded that came out 2 weeks before this one was we had a bit of a discussion around, AI and no, it's not right to use AI instead of paying artists. But at the same point, is this a situation where this creator just does not have the resources at this stage to pay an artist? And so it's this or nothing. And I don't know where the line is. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because Lord knows that's a deep one.
it is, and I don't want to necessarily get into that either. From my perspective, I can understand where someone might use placeholder artwork or you know, and again, we've talked about this in the past. You might use placeholder artwork that's just straight up riffed off the internet. But I wouldn't publish something like I can't get behind a project that is how do I want to say it? I think there's good sides and bad sides to everything. I
hmm
think there's people with good intentions that use AI art because they can't afford to buy an artist's work. I think at the same time, uh, you could find somebody that you could work with and get a reasonable price on artwork.
That's potential possible. Yeah.
I think there's enough. I think there's enough artists out there that you could get on and be like, listen, I'm looking for an artist. I don't have a lot of money. Looking for someone who is willing to go, and maybe you split profits from the game. Maybe you give them like I'm not a fan of there's a joke going around the internet. It's all been going around the internet for a long time of for exposure, right?
right.
some people hit up artists and be like, "Hey, can you do this and I'll pay you an exposure?" Like, no, that's not paying me. Like, but at the same time, if you go, "Hey, I don't have a lot of money to pay for this. I'm looking for an artist who's looking for some work and I can only pay X amount," and putting that out in the world is better than going, "Well, I can't afford to pay for an artist, so I'm just going to go to Midjourney."
Yeah, like I said, I don't know where the line is, and
I-
frankly,
And it's not my job to paint that line, but I just
well,
know for
right.
me morally, yeah.
I guess it like what I didn't see in the preview that's on drive through of this is what I would call centerpiece art. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's
it seems like the centerpiece art is very much a human drawn thing, which is fine. And that again makes me hopeful that the AI art that's in there now is just placeholder.
But in any
Because
case, if you want to check it out, it's pay what you want.
yeah,
It's called the Iron Grit Demo on drive through. It's 59 pages and was added to the site just a couple days ago. So
yeah,
if you
and
want to check it
pay
out,
what you want. So very cool. Well,
Mhm.
with all of that being said, as always, links to everything are in the show notes. Discord, Patreon. Please come join us on the Discord. We love having you over here. I may be a lurker, but I see all of the people that join, and I do welcome you to our Discord, our lovely
yeah,
discussion that's always happening.
he's the creepy Steve in the corner, and I'm the one who babbles on a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I just, yeah, but, yeah, with that being said, now, when you guys hear this episode, it'll probably be what, the week of Christmas?
No, this will come out on the 9th.
It'll come out on the 9th. Okay. So this will come out on the 9th, then we'll drop an actual play episode on the
Or the
16th,
16th.
and then the
We might
23rd
skip
is the
the
week of
23rd.
Christmas. That's what I was
It
just
may-
about to say. I'm thinking probably the 23rd and the 30th we'll skip, or at least maybe just drop like a mini-sode.
I don't know. We'll figure something out. But yeah, probably
Yeah.
skipping the 23rd for sure.
Yeah, so just a fair warning, as we approach the lovely holiday season with Christmas and New Year's right around the corner and all the other holidays associated with those, there might be some gaps in content. We usually take a couple breaks around this time of the year. It just is what it is. We will try and keep posting what we can, and like I said, we might drop a mini episode in between there. But as always, want to remind everyone to be kind to one another and get out there and play some RPGs.
Yep. Take care, y'all.
Intro and outro music by the band 12 Noon. You can email us at meandsteverpg@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter and RPGs. Find us on Facebook at Me and Steve RPG Podcast. On Discord at Me and Steve RPGs. And as always, all of these links are in the show notes. Thank you, and be kind to one another.
How much for the cigar?
Cigar, $20, dog. You gotta go down the street to the store and buy that.